Namaskarams to all of you. It is my great privilege and pleasure to present some thoughts on the Mooka Panchashati to all of you. Whatever I share today is a collection of things that I have observed and enjoyed while reading the Mooka Panchashati and reading about it in the past 3 or 4 years. The Mooka Panchashati is a stotra ratnam in praise of Goddess Kamakshi of Kanchipuram. The composer is Mookakavi, after whom the work itself is named. Mooka means mute. So this was a person who was born mute but was blessed by Goddess Kamakshi with the power of speech and poetry. In one of his verses, he describes the kataksham or glance of Kamakshi as a cloud which causes the grains of Kalyana Sukti Lahari, auspicious, beautiful verses, grains which wise men will enjoy, to grow on the tongues of devotees. And I felt that this phrase, Kalyana Sukti Lahari, so aptly describes the Mooka Panchashati itself, which is filled with auspicious, beautiful, benign verses. Many later poets and composers have marveled at this grace of the goddess. Muthuswami Dikshitar has mentioned this incident of Kamakshi blessing Mookakavi in many of his kritis on Kamakshi and on Ekamranatha, and even in the Kamalamba Navavaranam kritis. For example, in the kriti Saraswati Manohari in the same raga, it is about Goddess Kamakshi. He says, Karuna Katakshi Pahi Kamakshi Murahara Sodari Mukhya Kaumari Mooka Vak Pradhanakari Modakari. The Mooka Panchashati has been dear to many great souls who have learnt it and chanted it with great delight. We hear from the biography of Sri Seshadri Swamigal that his maternal lineage is one that of a family of Sri Vidya Upasakas who were appointed to worship Goddess Kamakshi in her temple. Even as a young boy, he used to wander the streets of Kanchipuram, often reciting the Mooka Panchashati, especially walking around the temple of Kamakshi. Jagadguru Sringeri Sri Chandrasekhara Bharati Swamigal also knew the Mooka Panchashati from a very tender age. We hear about a very amazing incident which would have happened around the age of 8. So as a young boy of around 8, he was sent by his mother on some work. He left home chanting the Mooka Panchashati and forgot about the world around him. He found himself in the next village, and only when an elderly person stopped him and asked him what he was doing there. Such was his immersion in this great work. Shri Kanchi Mahaswami, known as Mahaperiyava, was very fond of this work. He has explained many verses and quoted it in many places too, as we see in the Devatin Kural. He recommended it to many devotees that they should read it regularly. So do the Acharyas of today. More recently, Sri Govinda Damodara Swamigal, a great soul who was a scholarly exponent of the Valmiki Ramayanam, Bhagavatam, Narayaniyam, etc., he used to read the Mooka Panchashati, the entire 500 verses, every day of his life since the age of 10. He too has taught it to disciples and encouraged them to read it regularly. The Mooka Panchashati is organized as 5 parts, each one being a Shatakam of around 100 verses. Panchashati means 500. The entire work is very sweet sounding, very musical and filled with poetic and lyrical beauty, with many figures of speech like similes, metaphors, puns, fanciful conjectures and amazing descriptions. But everything is steeped in deep devotion and adoration to Kamakshi, to which all these become embellishments only. Now, what does Mookakavi say in these 500 verses? The contents of Mooka Panchashati can be broadly very broadly classified into three headings. Firstly, there are verses which describe and celebrate the boundless beauty of Kamakshi, her divine glory, her deep compassion, the deep mutual love shared by her with her husband, Lord Shiva. Secondly, there are verses which are declarations of the abundant gifts that Kamakshi showers on those who worship her. Wealth, beauty, status, as well as eternal bliss by giving jnanam and mukti. In many places, Mookakavi says that Kamakshi blesses her devotees with supreme eloquence, the power of poetry, even if they are mookas or dumb by birth. These references are not openly autobiographical, but can be interpreted to include his own experience too. Then we find instances of a third category of shlokas, which are prarthanas, requesting Kamakshi's protection and other benefits. With this introduction, we shall now see some aspects and verses from each of the Shatakams of Mooka Panchashati. Firstly is the Arya Shatakam. The Arya Shatakam gets its name based on two things. So the name can be interpreted in two ways. First is the entire Shatakam, which has 100 verses followed by one verse of Falashruti. The entire work is composed in a meter called Arya. It is also composed on the goddess who is called Arya. Arya is one of the names of Devi, as we see even in Kalidasa's Navaratna Malika, where he says, Aryam antar vibhavaye Gaurim. It is the opinion of many great people that all the tattvams or philosophical truths about Devi and her worship are there in the Arya Shatakam. Let us see some of these aspects. First, she is the spark of consciousness which activates the universe, which is the cause for the creation of the universe. She is Karana Parachidrupa. That is the very first word of the Arya Shatakam, very first word of the Mooka Panchashati itself. She is also described later as Chidvapusha, one who is the embodiment of Chit, consciousness. Secondly, she is the essence of all the Vedas, as we see from phrases like Aidamparyam Chakasti Nigamana. She is the truth expounded by Vedanta or the Upanishads. Mookakavi says she is Agama Vatamsa Kalika or Upanishad Aravinda Kuhara Madhudhara. She is the nectar found in the lotus of Upanishads. Next, we see that Kamakshi is described as taking 8 significant forms in this universe, the Ashtamurti, which are nothing but the 5 elements, the sun and the moon, and the Yajamana or Atman. This is described in the verse Dharanimayim, Taranimayim, Pavanamayim, Gagana Dahana Hotrimayim, Ambumayim, Indumayim, Ambam, Anukampam Adimam Ikshe. Next, Mookakavi tells us that it is Kamakshi who has taken the forms of Saraswati, Lakshmi and Parvati as the Shaktis of the Trimurtis who perform the various krityas in this world, like creation. He says this very poetically as, O mother, you have appropriated the mouth, the chest and the left half of the Trimurtis as Saraswati, Lakshmi and Parvati, as their Shaktis. Vadanaravinda Vaksho Vamanka Tati Vashamvadi Bhuta Purusha Tritaye Tredha Purandhri Rupa Tvameva Kamakshi. Another idea which he tells us is that it is Kamakshi who is the Kundalini Shakti, who resides in all the 6 Adhara chakras of the subtle body and also transcends them and reaches the 7th Sahasrara chakra. This too is mentioned in a very indirect way. He says, Kamakshi, you reside in the 6 lotuses which have 4, 6, 10, 12, 16 and 2 petals respectively. And even these numbers are coded in the verse using a method which we find often in Sanskrit poetry, where an object is used to denote a number. For example, the word Veda would denote 4 because there are 4 Vedas. Netram would denote 2 because we all have 2 eyes, etc. So he says, Jaladhi Dvigunita Hutavaha Disha Dineshwara Kala Ashvineya Dalaihi Nalinair Maheshi Gachasi Sarvottara Kara Kamaladalam Amalam. You reach the lotus with the largest number of petals, the 1000-petaled Sahasraram, through the one which has Jaladhi, which is the ocean, which means 4 petals. Dvigunita Hutavaha, 2 into 3. 3 is the Agnis that all Grihasthas nourish, and therefore it is 6. Disha, the 10 directions. Dineshwara, the 12, which is the Adityas. Kala, the 16 Kalas of the moon. Ashvineya, the 2 Ashwini Kumaras. So, using these code numbers, he tells us that these are the petals of the lotus that she resides in as Kundalini Shakti. Another very beautiful thing about Arya Shatakam is that there is a reference to Kanchipuram in each and every verse, either using the word Kanchi itself or using the word Kampanadi, the river on whose bank Kanchipuram was situated. The Sthala Puranam of Kanchipuram, we all know quite well. Kamakshi worshipped Lord Shiva in a Shivalingam under the mango tree on the bank of the river Kampa. And when the river flooded, she embraced the lingam tightly, leaving her bangle, etc., to mark the lingam. Immediately Lord Shiva appeared from it and married her. This legend of Kanchipuram has been mentioned by Mookakavi in the verse Ankita Shankara Deham Ankuritoroja Kankanashleshai. In another verse, he describes Kamakshi as Valayanka Sundari, the one who is the wife of the one who has Valaya Anka, the marks of her bangle. Shiva is described as the Adima Purusha, the ancient one who is Amrataru Moola Vasati, the one who resides under the mango tree. We all are familiar with the iconography of Kamakshi. She is seated holding the Pasham and Ankusham, and in her other 2 hands she holds a sugar cane as her bow and the 5 flowers as her arrows. And this is described in many places. One of the more important verses is Madhura Dhanusha Mahidhara Janusha Nandami Surabhi Banajusha. I delight in that form which holds the Madhura Dhanush, the sweet sugarcane as a bow, and Surabhi Bana, fragrant arrows, which are nothing but flowers. Another very interesting feature of Arya Shatakam is that in the last few verses, many different forms of Devi are described in each verse. Each verse is like a small, beautiful dhyana shlokam of those forms of Ambal. Forms like Varahi, Durga, Chamunda, Annapurna, etc. One of the most famous amongst these is the description of her form as Swayamvara Kalyani, holding a garland. Smaramadhana Varana Lola, Manmatha Hela Vilasa Manishala, Kanaka Ruchi Chauriya Sheela, Tvam Ambabala, Karabja Dhrita Mala. You're holding a mala in your hands, lotus-like hands. This shloka is to be recited many times by people who are hoping for a marriage to be solemnized in their families. Over and above all these profound concepts being explained in Arya Shatakam, it is also filled with lot of prasa, alliteration, rhymes, etc. I'll give you an example of one verse which has 4 rhyming words in the first line, and again 4 rhyming words in the second line. Liye purahara jaye maye tava taruna pallava chaye charane chandrabharane Kanchi Sharane Natarthi Samharane. Many beautiful phrases are found to describe Kamakshi in Arya Shatakam, like Shankara Nayanamritam, Lavanyamrita Taranga Mala, a series of waves of beauty, Puramathana Punya Koti, the pinnacle of the merits of Shiva who destroyed the Tripuras, Kanchi Ratna Vibhusha, and many such. Being made of small 2-line verses, the Arya Shatakam is the shortest and the easiest of the Shatakams to learn. Very ideal to start learning the Mooka Panchashati with. We now go on to the Padaravinda Shatakam, which describes the glory and beauty of Kamakshi's feet. Aravindam means lotus. So Padaravindam is lotus-like feet. The entire Padaravinda Shatakam is composed in a meter called Shikharini, which has 17 syllables in every line. In one of the verses, Mookakavi says that Kamakshi's feet are the essence of the Vedas, which are sought out by ascetics who have their intellects which are as sharp as the darbha grass, the tip of the darbha grass. And they examine everything in this world and discard everything else as worthless and go down the path of the Shastras and discover that it is Kamakshi's feet which are the essence. Jagan Nedam Paramiti Parityajya Yatibhihi Kushagriya Swantaihi Kushaladhishanaihi Shastra Saranau Gaveshyam Kamakshi Dhruvam Akritakanam Girisute Giram Aidamparyam Tavacharana Padmam Vijayate. It is the Aidamparyam, the Tatparyam of all the Vedas. In another verse, he requests Kamakshi that the dust of her feet, the feet which are red in color, the feet which are worshipped by all the devas and which remove all sins, should purify him too. Purify me with your feet's dust, O mother, the dust which is sought after by all the gods very eagerly. Pavitri kuryurnaha padatalabhuvaha patala ruchaha paragaste papa prashamana dhurinaha parashive kanam labdhum yesham nija shirasi Kamakshi vivashaha valanto vyatanvanti ahamahamikam madhava mukhaha. In another verse, he says that Kamakshi's feet are like a mirror made of polished gems. And what does this mirror show us? It is a mirror which is capable of showing or reflecting one's real self to those who bow to them. In other words, it can give us self-realization. Paratma prakashya pratiphalana chunchuhu pranamatam manognaha tvatpado mani mukura mudram kalayate. Mani mukuram means a mirror made of gems. What all can Kamakshi's feet do for us? Mookakavi makes a list in one of the shlokas. Bhavambhodhau naukam Jadima Vipine Pavaka Shikham. It is the boat in this sea of worldly suffering. It is the flame of fire to the forest of ignorance. Amartyendradinam adhimukutam uttamsa kalikam. It is the bud placed on the crowns of the gods. Jagattape jyotsnam akritaka vachah panjara pute shukastream kamakshyāha manasi kalaye padayugalim. It is the moonlight which can extinguish the heat of suffering in this world, and it is the parrot residing in the cage called the Vedas. I meditate upon this lotus feet, he says. Another poem which has a very delightful poetic imagination. We all would have heard of mantrikas or exorcists or we might have seen them in movies. Someone who mutters various incantations, throws ash on all sides, and drives away spirits which have possessed somebody. Mookakavi tells Kamakshi, Amba, your feet are like a mantrika, scattering the ash, which is the glow of your toenails, the white glow, in all directions. And the muttering is the tinkling of your anklets is the Maha Mantram that this mantrika recites. May this mantrika, which is your feet, drive away the spirit called mamata, my possessiveness, which has possessed me. Maha Mantram kinchin mani katakanadaihi mridu japan kshipan dikshu swachham nakharuchimayam bhasmana raja natanam kamakshi prakriti patuhu uchchatya mamata pishachim padoyam prakatayati te mantrika dasham. Another fanciful imagination. What happens when we are upset with someone who is far more powerful than us? We obviously cannot show our anger to them, so we might take it out on a softer target, on something which is connected to the more powerful thing. So Mookakavi tells Amba Kamakshi, O daughter of the mountain, the eventide, the Sandhya, is put to shame by the redness of your feet. We all know that the evening has a very beautiful red glow, but this glow is put to shame by Kamakshi's feet's red glow. But unable to show its anger to your feet, this evening time takes it out on lotuses and makes them close. Nirasta shonimna charana kirananam tavashive samindhana sandhya ruchihi achala rajanya tanaye asamarthyad enam paribhavitum etat samarucham sarojanam jane mukulayati shobham pratidinam. Kamakshi's feet are capable of even giving us the position of the Trimurtis. Now, the poet that he is, Mookakavi, says this in a very indirect way, in a very poetic way. He says, Kamakshi's feet can give you Patanjali, the expert grammarian, as your bed. We all know that Patanjali is an avataram of Adisesha. Kamakshi's feet can give you a forehead which does not tolerate the activities of Manmatha. As we know, Shiva burnt Manmatha with the eye on his forehead. Kamakshi's feet can give you the abode of honeybees, which is a lotus, as your seat. Mahabhashya Vyakhya Patu Shayanam Aropayati va Smara Vyaparershya Pishuna Nitilam Karayati va Dvirebhanam Adhyasayati Satatam va Adhivasatim Pranamran Kamakshyah Pada Nalina Mahatmya Garima. This is the greatness of her feet. Let us conclude this section on the Padaravinda Shatakam with a verse which is filled with prasam, poetic beauty, and also says that, Mookakavi says that, I immerse myself in meditating upon your feet, Kamakshi, which are greater than everything else in this world, which are the givers of mukti, which are like the moonlight, resemble the moonlight because of the toenails which are like moons, which are red in color, which are worshipped by the Devas and the Vedas, and which rival the lotus in beauty. Parasmat sarvasmadapicha parayoho mukti karayoho nakhashribhihi jyotsna kalita tulayoho tamra talayoho niliye kamakshyah nigama nutayoho naki natayoho nirasta pronmilan nalina madayoho eva padayoho. Now we go on to the third Shatakam, the Stuti Shatakam. The word Stuti means praise. In the Lalita Sahasranama, Devi is described as Stotrapriya Stutimati, one who is praised a lot and one who is fond of praise. When you love and adore someone, it is a very natural thing to want to praise them. And who can be more praiseworthy than our Divine Mother? The word Stuti is a very wide and general term, and therefore it is a wide canvas which the Stuti Shatakam provides. So we see a lot of variety in the themes as well as in the meters also. Every few verses the meters change in the Stuti Shatakam. In many verses in the Stuti Shatakam, Kamakshi is described to be the color of tapincha, which is a dark blue flower, or the nilotpalam, the blue lily, or the blue lotus, or dark clouds. This is different from the way she is described in Arya Shatakam and other places, where she is said to be the color of the rising sun, or the hibiscus, or the saffron flower, coral, etc. So how do we understand this difference? When Shiva is in his form as Rudra, the destroyer, his Shakti is Parvati, who is blue in color and whose color we find described often in the Stuti Shatakam. When Shiva, the same Shiva, becomes Sadashiva, the Anugraha Murti, the one who liberates individual jivas from this worldly existence, then his Shakti is Lalita or Kamakshi, who is red in color. This is why we find that in the Lalita Sahasranama, she is described as Udyat Bhanu Sahasrabha. She is like 1,000 rising suns, reddish in color. Or she is described as Dadimi Kusuma Prabha, the red of the pomegranate flower. Or Padmaraga Samaprabha, the color of a ruby, etc. So Parvati and Kamakshi are not different. In one verse in the Stuti Shatakam, Mookakavi describes Kamakshi as a river. He says that she is a river who is born from a mountain like any other river, the Himavan. But this river has stillness, Naischalyam. And unlike other rivers, this river can cool us merely by thinking about it. We don't need to go to the river also. And this river is strangely found on the bank of another river, Kampa. And it is filled with the water called compassion. Jata Shitala Shailataha Sukritinam Drishya Param Dehinam Lokanam Kshanamatra Samsmaranataha Santapa Vichedini Ascharyam Bahukhelanam Vitanute Naischalyam Abibhrati Kampayaha Tatasimni Kapi Tatini Karunya Pathomayi. In one of the verses in Stuti Shatakam, we find a rare moment of despondency in the Mooka Panchashati. Usually the entire mood of the Mooka Panchashati is one of exhilaration and joy, delight in the mother's compassion. In this verse, which is an exception which proves the rule, we could say, he says, Mother, how long are you going to let me wander around in this world, filling my stomach with earnings made from evil people? Please take mercy on me and cast your eyes on me. Janani bhuvane chankramyeham kiyantamanehasam kupurushakara bhrashtaihi dushtair dhanaihi udarambharihi taruna karune tandrashunye tarangaya lochane namati mayi te kinchit kanchipuri manidipike. The mood of this verse reminds us of Tyagaraja's Kriti, Durmargachara. Now another delightful verse, one of my favorites in this Shatakam, where Mookakavi says, there is some magic going on in Kanchipuram, and this magic is being unfolded by Aishani Kamakshi, the wife of Ishana, Shiva. There you find a cloud, and near the cloud you find a red lotus, and on the lotus you find a hibiscus flower. On the hibiscus flower, within that you find jasmine exhibiting its beauty, and there you hear the sound of the veena. This is the kind of magic. So as we can make out, this is how he's describing. He's describing the hair and the face, lips, teeth, and the voice, the sweet voice of Kamakshi, which is like the veena. Tamram bhojam jalada nikate tatra bandhuka pushpam tasmin malli kusuma sushama tatra veena ninadam vyavrinvana sukrita lahari kapi kanchi nagaryam aishani sa kalayati taram aindrajalam vilasam. This Aishani is performing some indrajalam here. We find many such other Atishayoktis also in the Stuti Shatakam. Now, talking about Manmatha, we know that he was defeated and even destroyed by Lord Shiva. He was then revived by Devi, and she blessed him with a lot of powers. In fact, in the Sri Vidya Sampradaya, Manmatha is one of the main upasakas of Kamakshi. He is a recipient of her great blessings and vatsalyam, motherly love. It is because she revived him that she is called Kama Sanjeevana Oshadhi in the Lalita Sahasranama. So, with the grace of Devi, Manmatha's defeat has now been converted to victory, because now we see that Shiva is entirely captivated and won over by Kamakshi's beauty, her love, her penance, etc. So, Kamakshi is described often as the cause for Manmatha's victory and his pride in that victory. For example, in a line in Stuti Shatakam, he says, Mookakavi says, Adhunvantyai tarala nayanaihi angajim vaijayanti. She causes the Vaijayanti, the victory flag of Angaja, which is Manmatha, to fly high with her fluttering eyes. They make the flag flutter high. Another place where we see a verse which describes the exaltation of a devotee who has total confidence in his bhakti and his Ishtadevam's protection, and therefore does not have a care in the world. Dhanena na ramamahe, khalajanan na sevamahe, na chapalam ayamahe, bhavabhayan na duyamahe. We do not care or take delight in wealth. We are not going to serve evil people. We have no fear of temptation towards the sense objects, and we are not afraid of rebirths. There is no rebirth for us. What is the reason for this exuberance? Sthiram tanumahetaram manasi kimcha kanchirata smarantaka kutumbini charanapallavopasanam. We have worshipped the feet of Amba, who is the wife of Smarantaka, Shiva, the destroyer of Manmatha. This mood in the Mooka Panchashati, which we find is very similar to Appar Swamikal's Devaram, where he says, Namarkum kudiyallom namanai anjom. And the same reason is given by him too, in the same verse, in the last 2-3 lines, where he says, Shankaran nal sanga ven kurayor kadil komarke nam endrum mila alai koi malar sevadinaye kuruhinome. We have worshipped the feet of Shiva, so we are not afraid of anyone else in this world. This also reminds me of Bharatiyar's verse, where he says, Bhumiyil evarkum ini adimai seyyom, paripurananke adimai seidu vazhvom. In the Phalashruti of the Stuti Shatakam, Mookakavi tells us that this exquisite stavam, graceful, peshalam, will grant you all the boons that you need. There is no need for you to go for japa and yajnas and other difficult sadhanas which are so severe on the body. Japaihi alam makhaihi adhika deha samshoshanaihi, he says. We conclude this section with a beautiful verse from the Stuti Shatakam, which is a lovely praise of Kamakshi. Samara Vijaya Koti Sadhakananda Dhati Mriduguna Paripeti Mukhya Kadamba Vati Muni Nuta Paripati Mohita Janda Koti Paramashiva Vadhuti Patumam Kamakoti. May Kamakoti protect us. Before going into the Kataksha Shatakam, which is the fourth Shatakam, there's one thing which I would like to share. Kanchi Mahaswami Mahaperiyava has written a very long Sri Mukham to the Mooka Panchashati when it was published by the Kamakoti Koshasthanam. In that Sri Mukham, which is entirely in Sanskrit, he has explained the reason for the 5 Shatakams to be in that order that they are. He says that a bhakta is spiritually like an infant first and can only sense his mother with his mind. And Arya Shatakam is that initial understanding of the Divine Mother. Mookakavi conveys this with the verse starting Antarapi Bahirapi. Then, with her grace, his sense organs grow in strength, and the first thing that the bhakta sees at his level, where he is her divine feet. He then clings to them and attains further development with her grace. This is hinted in the verse Maralinam Yanabhyasana Kalana Moola Gurave. He is now able to talk and express his love for his object of adoration, his mother. And that is what the Stuti Shatakam indicates. This is shown in the verse, the very first verse of the Stuti Shatakam, Pandityam Parameshwari Stuti Vidhau. Through his stutis, he receives Amba's affectionate glances, the Kataksham. And with that, he gets Jnanam, Pushti and Tejas, all the spiritual nourishment that he needs. This is indicated in the verse, Astam Kshanan Nayatume Paritapa Suryam. With her gracious compassion, he then experiences divine bliss, which is indicated through the Mandasmita Shatakam in the verse Aryameva Vibhavayan. So this is how Mahaperiyava has explained the 5 Shatakams to us. With this context, we will now take a closer look at Kataksha Shatak. It is composed entirely in a very sprightly meter called the Vasanta Tilakam, almost like mirroring the fluttering and darting glances of Kamakshi. It is the poetic convention in Sanskrit kavyas to ascribe colors to abstract things. Passion or raga is said to be red in color, fame is white, etc. Due to emanating from the eyes which are dark and adorned with kajal or anjanam, Kamakshi's glances are always described as dark or black, like the waters of the Yamuna or the night or sapphires, etc. These are the similes, some of the similes Mookakavi uses in this Shatak. Whoever gets your glances, O Kamakshi, Goddess Saraswati becomes his constant companion and Goddess Lakshmi does his bidding. The whole world becomes his home and his form pleases everyone. Vagishwari Sahachari Niyamena Lakshmihi Bruvallari Vashakari Bhuvanani Geham Rupam Triloka Nayanamritam Ambatesham Kamakshi Yeshu Tava Vikshana Paratantri. In Sanskrit kavyas, the connection between the spring season and the mango trees which blossom at that time and the kokilas or cuckoos that relish these tender blossoms is a favorite and often repeated theme. Mookakavi takes this to describe Devi's Kataksham. He says, O Kamakshi, your playful glances are the Vasanta Lakshmi, the goddess of spring. which fills madhvi rasam, nectar, in the mango trees or mango blossoms, which are the new verses composed by scholars, such that intelligent rasikas like kokilas will relish or cherish those verses. Praudhi karoti vidusham nava sukti dhati chutatavishu Buddha kokila lalyamanam madhvi rasam parimalam cha nirargalam. It also gives perfume to those verses. Kamakshi vikshana vilasa vasanta lakshmihi. Like a fisherman spreads a net far out and catches a fish that is deep inside the sea, Manmatha uses your wide glances to capture the heart of Shiva, which is like a fish that is immersed deep in the ocean of determined penance. Mookakavi says, Maheshwaram jhatiti manasa meenam amba kamakshi dhairya jaladhau nitaram nimagnam jalena shrinkhalayati tvad apanga namna vistaritena vishamayudha dashako asau. Dashaka means a fisherman. The words like vikshana and apanga are all synonyms of kataksham. Another beautiful verse which describes how Kamakshi's kataksham is the night, whose arrival signifies the moon of enlightenment rising in the summit of one's heart. Yavat kataksha rajani samayagamaste Kamakshi tavat achirat namatam naranam avirbhavati amritadidhiti bimbam amba samvinmayam hridaya purva girindra shringe. Amritadidhiti means the moon. It is samvinmayam, which is the form of enlightenment, rises in the hridaya shringam, in the summit, which is the eastern hill of the heart. And that too achirat namatam naranam, very quickly, for people who bow to you. We conclude this section on Kataksha Shatakam with a verse which salutes Devi's beautiful looks or glances, which lead us to mukti, which are filled with karuna and which captivate the heart of Shiva. Kaivalya divya mani rohana parvatebhyaha karunya nirjhara payah krita majjanebhyaha Kamakshi kinkarita shankara manasebhyaha tebhyo namostu tava vikshana vibhramebhyaha. The Kataksha Shatakam is the only Shatakam in Mooka Panchashati which does not have a Phalashruti. Almost like telling us that when you are in the gaze of the compassionate gaze of the mother, what more do you need? We now start looking at the Mandasmita Shatakam, the last Shatakam of the Mooka Panchashati. Mandasmitam means a gentle smile. So this is all about 100 verses about the beautiful smile of Kamakshi. If the Mooka Panchashati is an ocean, then the Mandasmita Shatakam is like the deepest part of that ocean. If it is a river, then we could call it the broadest expanse of the river. The verses are all long, set to a meter called Shardula Vikriditam, and the meanings are complex. In keeping with the poetic tradition of describing smiles to be white, Mookakavi compares Kamakshi's smiles to beautiful white objects like Karpuram, camphor, moonlight, the milk or milky ocean, the Ganga, who is always described to be white, like we find in the Ganga stothram, Hima vidhu mukta dhavala tarangi. And also to white flowers like the Mandara Pushpam, white lotus, the white lily, etc. One interesting thing to notice in the Mandasmita Shatakam is that Kamakshi is addressed here as Menatmaja in one of the verses, the daughter of Mena. Mooka Panchashati is one of those rare works where we find at least 3 references to Mena, the wife of Himavan, the great lady whom the Jaganmata chose as her Mata. Interestingly, Kanchanamala, the Pandya queen, who is Meenakshi's mother, when Devi took the avataram of Meenakshi, Kanchanamala is referred to in several kritis and songs and episodes of the Thiruvilayadal Puranam, etc. But Meena's reference is hard to find. Let your radiant smile be the lamp which shows me the path to mukti, which lights up the path to mukti for me. The path that is trodden only by some rare, courageous soul, and it is entirely inaccessible to those tied down by karma. And forget accessing, it is even invisible to those who are in delusion. Lead me to such a path, he prays. Kshunnam kenachideva dhira manasa kutrapi nanajanaihi karma granthi niyantritaihi asugamam kamakshi samanyataha mugdhaihi drashtumashakyameva manasa मूढ़स्य मे मौक्तिकं मार्गं दर्शयतु प्रदीप इवते mandasmita shririyam. So even though I am a moodha, you must show me the path to mukti. Another verse which I wish to share just for the beautiful sound. The meaning is quite simple. He says, O Kamakshi, the smile that adorns your face is more pleasing than the moonlight, than the moon. It is cooler than snow in putting out the heat of suffering, and it is whiter than pearls, so much so that these objects can be described to be the other extreme of these qualities. Shri Kamakshi Mukhendu Bhushanamidam Mandasmitam Tavakam Netranandakaram Tatha Himakaro Gached Yatha Tigmatam Sheetam Devi Tatha Yatha Himajalam Santapa Mudraspadam Shvetam Kimcha Tatha Yatha Malinatam Dhattecha Mukta Manihi. Another very touching prarthana in the Mandasmita Shatakam. O Mother, I have fallen into this fire, a blazing fire called the worldly existence, and it is fanned by the winds of my karma. So please sprinkle the drops of amrita, which are your smile, which are known for their cooling qualities, and remove my suffering. Indhane bhavaviti hotra nivahe karmaugha chanda anila praudhimna bahuli krite nipatitam santapa chintakulam mataha mam parishincha kinchid amalaihi piyusha varshairiva Shri Kamakshi tava smita dyutikanaihi shaishirya leelakaraihi. Now let us see a verse where the Mandasmitam is described in a very ethereal manner. Mooka says, O Kamakshi, whenever you look at Lord Shiva, there is a breeze of kautuhalam, fervor or ardent eagerness, and this wind causes a wave in your ocean of joy, Anandambudhi. This wave, which is in the form of samvit, cognition, awareness or consciousness, is described as your smile by great kavis, great rishis. Aloke tava panchasayaka ripoho uddama kautuhala prenkhan maruta ghattana prachalitat Ananda dugdhambudhehe kachid vichihi udanchati pratinava samvit prarohatmika. It is the sprout of samvit. Tam kamakshi kavishwaraha smitamiti vyakurvate sarvada. We'll conclude this section on Mandasmitam with a beautiful verse, a benediction which is recited at auspicious occasions like weddings and graha praveshams, etc. O Kamakshi, may your jasmine-like smile give us kulankasham mangalam. Kulankasham means abundant, overflowing mangalam. Those smiles which give joy to Shiva and which are white as camphor. Kuryurnaha Kulashaila Raja Tanaye Kulankasham Mangalam Kundaspardhana Chunchavaha Tava Shive Mandasmita Prakramaha Ye Kamakshi Samasta Sakshi Nayanam Santoshayanti Ishwaram Karpura Prakara Iva Prasrimaraha Pumsam Asadharanaha. I thank Shankara Hall for having given me this opportunity to talk about the Mooka Panchashati. I hope that many of you who are familiar with this work would have enjoyed revisiting the contents of the book, and the others too would have understood the greatness of this work. This work has been described by many great people as the one work which is very pleasing to Devi and capable of giving us everything which we need in this world and after. It is a great joy to just read or listen to this work. In fact, every time I read any particular Shatakam, I feel this is my favorite Shatakam. That is the kind of beauty it has. The Mooka Panchashati is full of mentions of beautiful objects. Things like the moon, milk ocean, Amrita, Ganga, Yamuna, emeralds, sapphires, rubies, various flowers like hibiscus, lotus, lily, various birds like parrots, chakoras, kokilas and peacocks, that the mind is just suffused with the beauty which is described and elevates us to a different plane. The whole world seems beautiful after reading all this, and it continues to be in that state of exhilaration. Now, this does not mean that the Mooka Panchashati is very simple to read and understand. It requires effort, definitely. In fact, I find that the verses are so packed with meaning that, like Valluvar says, it is Navildorum Nool Nayam. Every time you read the same verses, you discover new shades of meaning, new nuances and beauty. And it is not possible, at least in my experience, to focus and dwell on the meaning of more than 4 or 5 verses in a day or at a time because of the profundity of the meaning. So what I have shared today is just a small part of the big ocean that it is, a small sample, whatever little I knew, and I do hope that this will give us more opportunities to go deeper into the work and enjoy the beauty and the meaning. Mookakavi himself has said in the Stuti Shatakam that everything that you need, this work can give us, Ambal will give us. Shriyam Vidyam Dadyat Janani Namatam Kirtim Amitam Suputran Pradatte Jhatiti Kamakshi Karuna Trilokyam Adhikyam Tripura Paripanthi Pranayini Pranamaha Tvat Pade Shamita Durite Kim na kurute. Bowing to your feet, which are Shamita Duritam, which remove all our sins, gives us Shriyam, Vidyam, wealth and learning, Amitam Kirtim, lot of fame, Suputran Pradate, it gives us good children, Trilokyam Adhikyam, it gives us a high status in the 3 worlds. O Kamakshi, the wife of Tripura Paripanthi, the one who destroyed the Tripuras, Shiva. Your worship, Kim na kurute, what does it not do for us? So I conclude with a prayer that Goddess Kamakshi must shower all of us with her blessings and give us all the good things of life.